and a Squeeze. A little old lady lived all by herself, with a table and chairs and a jug on the shelf. A wise old man heard her grumble and grouse. "There's not enough room in my house. Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Taking your hen," said the wise old man. "Taking my hen? What a curious plan!" Well, the hen laid an egg on the fireside rug and flat round the room, knocking over the jug. The little old lady cried, "What shall I do? It was pokey for one, and it's tiny for two. My nose has a tickle, there's no room to sneeze. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Taking your goat," said the wise old man. "Taking my goat? What a curious plan!" Well, the goat chewed the curtains and trod on the egg, then sat down to nibble the table leg. The little old lady cried, "Glory be! It was tiny for two, it's titchy for three. The hen pecks the goat's got fleas. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Taking your pig," said the wise old man. "Taking my pig? What a curious plan!" So she took in her pig, who kept chasing the hen, raiding the larder again and again. And the little old lady cried, "Stop, I implore! It was titchy for three, it's teeny for four. Even the pig in the larder agrees. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Taking your cow," said the wise old man. "Taking my cow? It's a curious plan." Well, the cow took one look and charged straight at the pig, then jumped on the table and tapped out a jig. The little old lady cried, "Heavens alive! It was teeny for four, it's weeny for five. I'm tearing my hair out, I'm down on my knees. My house is a squash and a squeeze." And she said, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze." "Take them all out," said the wise old man, "but then I'll be back where I first began." So she opened the window, and out flew the hen. "That's better, at last I can sneeze again." She shooed out the goat and she shoved out the pig. "My house is beginning to feel pretty big." She huffed and she puffed, she pushed out the cow. "Just look at my house, it's enormous now. Thank you, old man, for the work you have done. It was weeny for five, it's gigantic for one. There's no need to grumble, there's no need to grouse. There's plenty of room in my house." And now she's full of frolics and fiddle-dee-dees, because it isn't a squash and it isn't a squeeze. Yes, she's full of frolics and fiddle-dee-dees, because it isn't a squash or a squeeze. Pumpkin soup. Can't get it open, George. Deep in the woods, there's an old white cabin with pumpkins in the garden, and there's a good old smell of soup. And at night, with luck, you might see a bagpiping cat through the window. There we are. And a squirrel with a banjo, and a small singing duck. Pumpkin soup, the best you've ever tasted. Made by the cat who slices up the pumpkin. Made by the squirrel who stirs in the water. Made by the duck who scoops up a pipkin of salt and tips it in just enough. They slurp the soup and play their song. Then they pop off the bed in a quilt stitched together by the cat, embroidered by the squirrel, and filled with fine feathers from the duck. And it's peaceful in the old white cabin, Everyone has his own job to do. Everyone is happy. Or so it seems. But one morning, the duck woke up early. He tiptoed into the kitchen and smiled at the squirrel's special spoon. "Wouldn't it be fine," he murmured, "if I could be the head cook?" He drew up a stool and hopped on top and reached until his beak just touched the tip of the spoon. Then the duck trotted back to the bedroom, held up the spoon and said, "Today it's my turn to stir the soup." "That's mine," said the squirrel. "Stirring is my job. Give that back." "You're much too small," snapped the cat. "We'll cook the way we always have." But the duck held on tight until the squirrel tugged with all his might, and whoops! The spoon spun through the air and bopped the cat on the head. Then there was trouble, a horrible squabble, a row, a racket, a rumpus in the old white cabin. "I'm not staying here," wailed the duck. "You never let me help with anything." And he packed up a barrow, put on his hat, and waddled away. "You'll be back," stormed the cat, "after we've cleaned up." And the squirrel shook his spoon in the air. But the duck didn't come back. Not for breakfast, not even for lunch. "I'll find him," scoffed the cat. "He'll be hiding outside. I bet he's in the pumpkin patch." But the duck was not in the pumpkin patch. They could not find him anywhere. So they waited all that long afternoon. The cat watched the door. The squirrel paced the floor. "That duck will be sorry when he comes home," they muttered. But the duck didn't come home, not even at soup time. The soup wasn't tasty. They'd made it too salty. They didn't feel hungry anyway. They both sobbed over supper, and their tears dripped into the soup and made it even saltier. "We should have let him stir the soup," sniffed the squirrel. "He was only trying to help," wept the cat. "Let's go out and look for him." The cat and the squirrel were scared as they wandered down the path in the dark, dark woods. They feared for the duck all alone with the trees, and the foxes and the wolves and the witches and the bears, but they couldn't find him. On and on they trotted. They reached the edge of a steep, steep cliff. "Maybe he fell down that," wailed the cat. "I'll save him," squeaked the squirrel, and he scrambled down on a long shaky rope. He searched all around on the ground, but he couldn't find the duck. Then the cat whispered in a sad little voice, "Duck might have found some better friends." "He might," yelped the squirrel, "friends who let him help." And the more they thought about it, as they plodded back, the more they were sure they were right. But when they were almost home, they saw light coming from the old white cabin. "It's Duck!" they shrieked as they burst through the door. And Duck was so pleased to see them. He was also very hungry, and though it was late, they thought they would all make some pumpkin soup. When the duck stirred, the cat and the squirrel didn't say a word, not even when the duck stirred the soup so fast that it stopped right out of the pot, not even when the pot got burnt. Then the duck showed the squirrel how to measure out the salt, and the soup was the best you've ever tasted. So once again it was peaceful in the old white cabin, until the duck said, "I think I'll play the bagpipes now." Dogs. I love dogs. I love big dogs and small dogs. I love stroppy dogs and soppy dogs. I love dogs that bark and dogs that don't. I love dogs that play and dogs that won't. I love hairy dogs and bald dogs. Stripy dogs and spotty dogs. I love dogs that are good and dogs that are bad. But the dog that I love best, well, let's see. Is any dog that won't chase me.